anointed one, ultimately the Messiah of whom Cyrus was a type. Moody Bible Commentary says, the English translation of the Hebrew term Messiah applies to the Messiah himself in this context. Again, the Bible Knowledge Commentary says, the term probably refers to the coming Messiah. By preserving the people of Israel, delivering them out of Egypt, and then later from the Babylonian captivity, God maintained the line for the Messiah. So he's doing this. What is one reason he's doing this? Well, if Israel gets snuffed out, what happens to the Messiah? The promise of a coming Messiah through the nation of Israel. Well, that could not be allowed to happen. One reason God's delivering his people back here has the Messiah ultimately in view, the anointed one. And then verse 13 continues on by saying, you struck the head from the house of the wicked by laying bare from foundation to neck, Selah. Well, what's this mean? Well, the picture here is of a fatal blow. It pictures literally the head of the house being destroyed. Again, we read in the Bible Knowledge Commentary, the figure in the Hebrew is that of a building from which the gable is ripped off and then the entire structure is demolished so that the foundations are laid bare. So again, some think this is talking about Pharaoh and how God brought him down. Others think it's talking about the Babylonian king, Belshazzar. Still others, in keeping with the statement about the anointed one, believe this is ultimately going to be fulfilled in relationship to the devil, who is the head of all the wicked powers of the world. Therefore, either the Egyptian leadership or the Babylonian leadership may be in view, but behind both was ultimately Satan, the head of the evil house, if you will, and therefore ultimate application here may have Satan in view. Another quote from the Moody Bible Commentary. When the Lord comes in judgment, he will strike the head of the house of evil, which in addition to the immediate context is an allusion to the promise of the Messiah's ultimate victory over Satan. There is a kingdom mix in the book. You do understand that, right? We saw this in Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 14 that ultimately looks to the end of history. That is premillennial. When the Lord shall put in place, and millennial, when the Lord shall put in place all the enemies of Israel, put them down. Certainly God in the past has applied a mortal wound to Israel's enemies, such as Egypt, such as Babylon, and he will certainly do so with finality in conjunction with the coming of the Lord. Verse 14, you thrust through with his own arrows the head of his villages. They came out like a whirlwind to scatter me. Their rejoicing was like feasting on the poor in secret. So there's a context here where we don't know exactly what's in view here either, but whoever this is, they're coming out like they're really going to take advantage of these poor people, God's people, Israel, and then God turns the tables on them. Again, it's not really clear. Are we talking about the Egyptians? Are we talking about the Babylonians? It may refer very well to Pharaoh's pursuit of the children of Israel as they were leaving Egypt. Recall that they changed their mind and they went after them, and they looked like they'd be pretty vulnerable, right? I mean, these were slaves in Egypt. They had no instruments of war or anything. We're just going to go after them and bring them back. Well, that did not happen, as God turned the tables on them, so to speak, at the Red Sea. But verse 15 adds credibility to this view, as it poetically seems to describe God's intervention on Israel's behalf at the Red Sea. Verse 15, you walk through the sea with your horses. So again, the connection here with the sea. You walk through the sea with your horses through the heap of great waters. The Exodus is the major redemptive event in the Old Testament era, in Old Testament history, being mentioned hundreds of times in the scriptures. In fact, it's mentioned so many times in this way or that way to really try to find exactly how many times it's mentioned. It's very hard to find somebody that's done that kind of a study, but it is the major redemptive event in the Old Testament. Coming to a climax with God drowning the Egyptian army in the Red Sea. And most commentators agree, they think that's what's being talked about here in verse 15. And it wasn't a memorable event, an amazing event. Exodus 14:31, that's the last verse, and then chapter 15, verse 1. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang this song to the Lord and spoke, saying, I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. Just as the Lord trampled the Egyptian army with his own horses, so to speak, in the Red Sea, so he would defeat the Babylonian power currently on the scene in the days of Habakkuk, and ultimately will strike the head of Satan at the second coming of Jesus Christ. Historically, God has victoriously led his people out of the mighty grasp of Egypt, through the Red Sea, and onto Mount Sinai, revealing his glory all along the way. And then from Mount Sinai on through the wilderness, then through the Jordan River, and into the Promised Land. God led them all the way with many great events where he intervened through nature. Therefore, the point is clear. The God who can do all of this can certainly be counted on to lead his people in triumph over their enemies, no matter how great they might appear at the moment. And Babylon at the moment appeared to be really great, but he's reflecting now on how God has led in the past. God would one day do it again. That's what he's looking forward to, according to what God had said in chapter 2. It would happen in God's appointed way, in his timing, and for his glory. I like this quote from Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Though the mills of God grind slowly, yet they grind exceedingly small. Though with patience he stands waiting, with exactness grinds he all. Boy, there is truth in that. The sovereign plan of God has a way of working its way out according to the mills of God. They grind slow, and you say, boy, where's this going? It's taking forever to get there. It's God's timing. It's God's purpose. But I'm telling you, the conclusion of the matter is in God's hands. And that's what Habakkuk is seeing here. No pun intended with the word exactly here. With exactness grinds he all. He is sovereign over all. And faith trusts his character. Faith trusts his word to bring to pass exactly what he has promised, even in the face of circumstances that say, boy, how's that ever going to happen? Well, just remember what has happened with Israel in the past. All these great events, how God intervened. He is able to do it again, and he will do it again. And all those promises that we have in the scriptures related to what God's going to do in the last days as far as delivering his people, it's going to happen. I don't know when. Remember, the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine or exceedingly small. Well, that ends our study for tonight. We'll pick it up not next Sunday night. We'll finish out on the 16th, May 16th. We'll finish out the study here. So let's stand and have our closing song for tonight.